Hello, welcome to my channel, another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a tag. This tag was originally created on the channel Jim's Books, Reading, and Stuff. I found it on Sunday, and I decided this would be a fun little tag to do. Now, I have not been officially tagged because my channel is so new. Most people don't know I'm here, and no one has tagged me yet. So I am tagging myself on this, what is called the A tag. So this tag has 6 questions. And question number 1 is A. A is for America. What do you consider the great American novel? Now, this is a very complex and nuanced question because there is no one great American novel. If you asked 50 people what the great American novel was, well, 25 people wouldn't know an American novel, but the other 25 would give you at least 26 answers because someone would change their mind after giving you an answer. And it's very subject to time. If you asked what the great American novel was in the 30s, you would get one question or one answer. Asked in the 50s, you'd get another answer. Now, very famously, Ernest Hemingway said the great American novel was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And that's hard to refute, but I think it's a little dated, even though that's a very, very good book. It's just fitting for more of his times and maybe even today. So again, it depends on the person. If you were to ask an African American person, they might say Native Son or Invisible Man. I know if you ask my wife, she would say Willa Cather, probably Song of the Lark or Lady Lost or one of her other novels. That's her choice. The great American novel just cannot be pinned down to one. So I'm going to pick what I think is a great American novel. And this is one that I have read earlier this year for the first time. And I think it needs a little more recognition, even though it was published originally in 1975 and won the National Book Award. And that is J.R. by William Gaddis. Now, this book is a satire. It is 770 pages long and has about 70 pages of narrative. The rest is all dialogue, unattributed dialogue. So the reader has to read very carefully to know who's speaking that line of dialogue. But once you get going, it's very interesting. Now, this book is a satire on American business. It just pokes fun at what Americans think about business. And since America is so fond of business, I think this is why it's a great American novel, because it's telling us what our passions are about. And in this novel, an 11-year-old boy speaking through a payphone at school convinces people that he is actually a business investor and starts buying stocks of companies that are basically valueless. And he starts amassing this paper wealth of millions of dollars in businesses that owe even more money. But he is recognized, or his company that he calls JR Family of Businesses is recognized as this multi-million international company. And everyone wants to make him happy. And he is an 11-year boy. He doesn't know what he's doing. So he hires or bamboozles his music teacher into being the front for this business. And it's just the adventures of this music teacher, this boy, and a whole bunch of other cast of characters. Now, JR, as I said, a very ignorant 11-year-old boy. At one point, towards the end, he's handed this paper, and he goes to his teacher and goes, "What is a subpoena? We haven't learned this in class yet. I don't know what a subpoena is." And it's absolutely hilarious because everyone else knows what a subpoena is, and it's just this massive crash of business going down the toilet. And in many ways, it reminded me of Bernie Madoff. People here, you remember Bernie Madoff fooled everyone with his schemes? That's exactly what JR is doing in this book. And it's absolutely hilarious. It's a very difficult book to read. When I read it, I listened to the audiobook and read the text at the same time, and that was very made the text very solid and very easy to understand. But Gaddis is known as Mr. Difficult. Okay, question number 2. A is for arc. Which character in literature has the most interesting character arc? Now I'm actually going to pick 2 books here. It's a little bit of a cheat, but the first one I want to pick is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This might be one of the most famous character arcs in all literature. When Dostoevsky thinks he's, what is the equivalent of the Nietzschean Superman, saying, I am a poor student, I am better than anyone else, I can get away with murder because I deserve it more than anyone else. And let's just say, if you haven't read this, it doesn't go quite as well as Raskolnikov planned. But you get to see this arc of him as the student thinking that he can get away with murder to someone who knows that he cannot get away with murder. And I will leave it at that. The next one of a character arc I want to discuss is the Thomas Covenant series, the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. And this is a series of fantasy books that I read. I can't get that cover held up right. In high school. I first read it in high school in the 80s. And if you don't know this, this is a story of Thomas Covenant, and he was diagnosed with leprosy after he became famous. He was first a budding famous novelist, and then he was diagnosed with leprosy. And his wife divorced him, took away his son. The town where he lives treats him as a total pariah. They don't want to have anything to do with him, even though leprosy is not a contagious disease. It just has this bad reputation. And then he is, let's just say, taken to a fantasy land. And a 15-year-old girl heals him of his leprosy with this magical mud called heartloom. And he becomes so overwhelmed because the leprosy basically means you have no sensation in your extremities. You can't feel your fingers. You can't feel your toes. He's completely impotent. And he's basically driven mad by this sudden healing. And he rapes this 15-year-old girl. And then it's discovered that the people of this land believe that he is the reincarnation of this great hero called Breck Halfhand. I can't quite remember his last name. But it would be like if you saw the reincarnation of Abraham Lincoln to save the United States. You say, yeah, Lincoln could save our states. But Thomas Covenant is not a nice man. He does not believe this land is real. He believes he's imagining it all. And I said, he rapes a 15-year-old girl, and that just has disastrous consequences. There is a scene where the girl's mother has to transport Thomas Covenant up a river to this council, and you just feel this mother trying not to burst in this outrage, and her mind is slowly being destroyed by what Thomas Covenant has done to his daughter, and the fact that she has to treat him as a hero. And that has great consequences in the later volumes of the book. And after that, it's the arc of Thomas Covenant coming to terms with what he does, and he did, and his unbelief, and having to become, very unreluctantly, a hero to save that land. And that's a very good character arc. So number 3, A is for Australia. What was the last book you read by an Australian author? That would be The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. This is a contemporary Australian romance. It is the story of Lucy, who marries into a family. And the family of the husband used to be very rich. The husband created a big business and passed away. And the wife, Diana, holds on to her money very dearly and will not let that money go. And then one day, it's found that Diana is dead. And there's a suicide note near her body claiming that she no longer wants to live because she has been diagnosed with cancer. there is an autopsy done, and the autopsy discovers there is no cancer. And it becomes more and more clear that this woman was that Diana was murdered. And true to mystery, everyone in the family, including Lucy, who's the narrator, has motives for this murder. And you're going through and say, okay, who killed Diana? Why was she killed? And I would not say it's the greatest mystery I've ever read, but it's a very fine mystery, and the latest book by an Australian that I have read. Number 4. A is for Austen. What do you plan to do for hashtag Jane Austen July? I don't plan to do anything for Jane Austen. She doesn't move me very much. I know my wife loves Jane Austen movies, and when she watches Jane Austen movies, I know I have to go sleep in the doghouse because I can't compare with Mr. Darcy. So nothing for Jane Austen. Number 5, A is for automobile. What is your favorite literary automobile? I had to think about that for a while. Most of the books I read don't feature a lot of automobiles, but then I remembered that Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov features an automobile. I don't remember the brand or the make of the automobile, but there is a section in that novel when Humbert and Lolita are driving across America in an automobile, fleeing he's fleeing his life. He's fleeing his deeds. He's trying not to let people know what he's doing. He's driving around this car, going from motel to motel, into things gradually just start to fall apart. And that is the only automobile I can think of. So number 6, A is for anonymous. What is your favorite book or poem published anonymously? The last book I read by an anonymous author was called A Warning, officially published by Anonymous. It was a Trump administration official, and it's basically a rant against, or was a rant against Trump. It was a very dull book. I agreed with everything the author said, but just listening to someone rant against someone you don't like is not necessarily a great book. I guess the greatest book by an anonymous author would be The Epic of Gilgamesh. That is also the oldest book. It was written in Sumerian, way like 2,000, 3,000 years BC. I don't even remember how long ago that was. It's a very old book. So, number 7. A is for autobiography. What was the last autobiography you read? That would be Rust, a memoir of steel and grit by Elise Colette Goldbach. She was a 29-year-old ex-English major living in Cleveland, Ohio, painting houses. And she did not know what to do with her life. So she applied to the Cleveland Steel Mill. Now, in Cleveland, the steel mill is a very highly sought after job. It is a union job, and you get very good wages working at that steel mill. It's described that new steel workers tend to go a little crazy with their paychecks because they're not used to living on those paychecks. It's apparently a lot of money. The author did not say how much money they made, but apparently it's a very good amount. So she gets her job in a steel mill. And the memoir goes through the different type of jobs she has there. And some of those jobs just sound absolutely dreadful. You are on a catwalk over this molten river of steel, pulling out these clumps of zinc that are clogged, that are forming on the molten steel that will spoil the steel eventually. And it just sounds dreadful. And then the book goes more into her personal life. She describes an earlier sexual assault that she had and how she overcame that. And within this biography, the good part was the people that she describes working there. These are people that I would never normally come in contact with, but she described them very humanely. And the fact is, if you were working in that steel mill, yeah, maybe you could sort of be friends with them. And there's this great sense of camaraderie that you are all in this steel mill together and sort of joined together in this group. And I found that very interesting. So if you like memoirs, I could definitely recommend Rust by Elise Colette Goldbach. And number 8, A is for audiobooks. Do you consider listening to an audiobook as reading? Yes, I do consider an audiobook as reading. In a way, it is an interpretation. You are listening to someone else read it to you, but that's not even as different as reading a book in translation. When you read Fyodor Dostoevsky, you are reading the translator's interpretation of Dostoevsky's Russian, and it can be vastly different. When you listen to a narrator narrate an audiobook, yes, sometimes he or she can be making interpretations that you would not normally interpret yourself if you're reading the book in print. But I said it's no real different from reading a book in translation, even less so. And I just happen to love audiobooks. I've been listening to audiobooks for 20 years, and I could not imagine my reading life without them. It started off when I had to commute, and you had 45 minutes to an hour each way, and I would listen to the audiobooks on cassette, and you'd have to get those cassette books at the library because they were very, very expensive back then. And eventually I moved on to Audible, and I have a subscription to Audible. I subscribe to the premium plan, 24 books a year paid up front, and I can buy all at once or parcel them out. So yes, I do consider audiobooks fully immersive reading. And that is the end of my tag. So now it is time for me to tag other booktubers. And as I said, I'm very new and I don't know a lot of people or a lot of channels very well yet. So I have picked 2 people who are very kind to watch some of my early videos and make comments, and I have traded comments back. So I'm going to tag them. Now, if you don't want to do this tag, please ignore it. Feel free to do nothing. So I am going to tag Jay's Booktubing channel and Lady Jane's Books channel. So if you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up if you like it, or if you think I need to do better, go ahead and give it a thumbs down. Thank you very much and have a good day. Goodbye.